Can all of punk bass be boiled down to 10 songs? I think it can.
Baby, you got a stew going.
Greetings, people of YouTube. Welcome back to
Pick the Bass.
Punk bass is pretty much as iconic as punk itself. From the 1970s through the 1990s, punk bassists redefined what the bass could be. They took an instrument that so often was there just to fill in the low end and made it the star.
You want to be a star, don't you?
In punk, bass often pushes the melody. It's the hook. Punk bass rules. Here's the deal. I'm going to go through the history of punk bass in 10 songs. I'm putting them in order of release. I can't include every band. I can't include every bassist. I probably won't include your favorite song. I tried to pick well-known songs that are good examples of each bass player's style. So who are these legends that helped define the genre, and what songs did they use to leave their mark? Come along with me and we'll find out.
Let's do this!
Here's where I get in trouble. Punk starts with the Ramones. It's February of 1976. The song is Blitzkrieg Bop, the opening track off their game-changing self-titled debut. Written by drummer Tommy Ramone, this is the world's first real taste of punk rock. There had been hints of punk before the Ramones. We had building blocks like the Stooges and the MC5, but no one had ever put it together quite like this. Rock music had gotten old. It was bloated and stagnant, and it was time for a change.
El queso está viejo y podrido. ¿Dónde está el sanitario?
The Ramones came along and kicked rock in the ass. They took the simplicity of early 60s rock, dropped every ounce of fluff, and bumped the tempo up by 40 beats per minute. Their music felt like a sonic assault. Dee Dee drove every song with non-stop downstrokes. He pioneered riding the root notes, and it's still a staple of punk rock bass to this day. The Ramones covered everything from pop to politics. They laid the groundwork for pretty much everything punk has grown into, and none of that would have been possible without Dee Dee's bass. Check out a bit of where it all comes from. Blitzkrieg Bop.
Aye, oh, let's go. Aye, oh, let's go. The falling in straight line.
Who started punk? That's a question that has been asked countless times, and it usually comes down to the Ramones or the Sex Pistols. The Ramones certainly were first, but in my opinion, the Sex Pistols get the gold. They defined the attitude and style. Punk might have started with music, but it spread through fashion and snarl. The Sex Pistols vibes inspired countless youth to venture out and create chaos. It didn't hurt that their music was incredible as well. Sid Vicious was the archetype of the classic punk rock bad boy. He also couldn't play bass and wasn't really a part of their 1976 debut. Never mind the bollocks, here's the Sex Pistols. Bassist Glenn Matlock wrote most of the songs, but after his departure, it was guitarist Steve Jones who actually recorded most of the tracks. Glenn did play on Anarchy in the UK, and it is by far the standout bass track of the album.
So fucking sweet.
While I often think of the Sex Pistols as the band that gave punk its look, there's no denying the importance of their music as well. Check out a bit of Anarchy in the UK.
I am an antichrist. I am an anarchist.
If the Ramones was the sound of punk and the Sex Pistols was its look, then the Clash was its soul. They were called the only band that matters and that still feels relevant. They used their art to teach about society and injustice, and that's so punk. While their first two albums were incredible, they were also way more of the time punk rock. Their third album, 1979's London Calling, is an experimental double album masterpiece. It continues expanding on their punk and reggae roots while exploring other genres like R&B and rockabilly. At the time, no other punk band could have pulled this off and been successful. The title track is a masterclass in punk rock bass. Paul Simonon's groove is the best. He was really the first punk player to make the bass a star. Instead of simply riding root notes, Paul played melodies and used the entire neck. The London Calling bass line dances around reggae vibes while the rest of the music feels like a march. It's chaotic. Even without the lyrics, the song would still make me feel anxious. Bass lines like this would have been perfectly at home in the mid-90s, but in 1979, Paul was an island. He also was one of the coolest looking punks at the time. His style had all of the attitude, but with a hint of sophistication and class. Check out a bit of London Calling. Dead Kennedys is our first 80s band. Punk is now moving away from the mainstream and into the underground, where it would stay for the next 15 years or so. Dead Kennedys were at the forefront of this era of punk and played a huge part in the West Coast hardcore punk scene. They were hyper-focused on politics and social justice. They rubbed your face in the horrors of the day and forced you to think about it. While they mostly dealt with politics, they weren't above trolling the shit out of pop culture or even the punk scene itself. Their second single, Holiday in Cambodia, is a great example of their style. The lyrics weave between ripping on overprivileged college kids and the atrocities of dictator Pol Pot. Musically, it's like a surf song from hell. It's meant to make you feel uncomfortable, and man does it succeed. Klaus Fluoride is an all-around great bass player and doesn't get enough props for his chops or influence. He starts the song with a droning riff of bass chords. This was unheard of at the time, but would go on to be a punk staple with people like Fat Mike and Mark Hoppus. The bass playing on their 1980 debut, Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables, is like a sneak peek into what 90s bass would become. Check out a bit of Holiday in Cambodia. The Dead Kennedys and The Clash are super serious. The Descendants are sort of the exact opposite. While they occasionally deal with politics and pain, they mostly focus on love, fishing, and farts. Their 1982 debut, Milo Goes to College, is often thought of as the first pop-punk album. It's fast and fun. That's the California sound that does it for me the most. These days, people think of Carl Alvarez when they think of the Descendants, but their original bassist Tony Lombardo is just as much of a legend. Tony had the speed of Dee Dee and the chops of Klaus. He influenced every 90s player, including Carl. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I think Milo Goes to College is the most important album in punk rock history. All of the tracks are bangers, but I think Myage really shows who they were at the time and builds a blueprint for everyone to follow. I know Bill wrote the tune, but it's Tony killing it on the record. Check out a bit of the intro. We're now in the late 80s. Punk is about to go through some massive changes. There are two bands that I think are most responsible, and that's Operation Ivy and Bad Religion. Bad Religion had been a band since 1980, but they didn't really find their sound until 1988's Suffer. This is the birth of the Epitaph sound, and in a roundabout way, it's also the birth of Fat Records. Without Suffer, 90s West Coast punk would sound wildly different. Like pretty much all Bad Religion albums, the lyrics on Suffer are smart, and the music is dark and fast. Jay Bentley doesn't stick out too much. He mostly rides the root notes. That doesn't mean he's bad. He has such a groove. The patterns that he plays will be picked up by people like Fat Mike and Jesse Buglione and will become the default vibe for fast punk bass. I really considered going with Give You Nothing, but how could I choose anything other than Do What You Want? I think if I could only have one Bad Religion song, it's this one. Check it out. We're now in the 90s. Punk is about to reach its final form and hit the big time. One of the first bands to use this new shiny sound to break into the mainstream was Green Day. Without Green Day, punk may have never had its resurgence. Their 1994 release Dookie was a massive hit. Everyone had this album. It came in the mail with samples of Tide.
Came in the mail with samples of Tide.
There isn't a single punk bassist born after 1980 that wasn't influenced by Dookie. Mike Dirnt is one of the most well-rounded punk rock bass players ever. He can be super fast and flashy, but he can also ride the root notes through an entire song and make it feel and sound just as good. He's written some of the most iconic bass lines. Mike is probably the first person on this list with top-tier tone. This is the tone that everyone's chasing. Mike refined what everyone before him had done and built upon it. I think the only other bassist that can do it all the way that Mike can is Dan Andriano from Alkaline Trio. But let's be honest, I say Mike Dirnt, you immediately think of one song, Longview. It's the bass line. It's complex, it's shiny, it's punk as f***. Check out a bit of the intro. I have a huge bias with this one. Blink-182 is one of my two favorite bands. I think Mark Hoppus is one of the most creative bassists of all time. Mark is a bass chord master. He's known for layering 4-string tracks and then adding a Fender Bass 6 underneath. He creates lush bass soundscapes that are so unique to his style. His use of bass chords has been an inspiration on countless bassists, and it all starts with Carousel. Carousel originally came out on their demo Buddha in '94, but its official release was on Cheshire Cat in '95. The original recordings are not the best, and I prefer the version from the Mark, Tom, and Travis show. To me, this is where modern pop punk starts. Without Blink, there would have never been a Drive-Thru Records. There is nothing more Southern California than Blink-182. Check out a bit of Carousel. And Out Come the Wolves is a weird album. It almost feels out of time. It came out in 1995. We were well into the third wave of punk, and Rancid drops an LP that sounds like a lost Clash album. This fits in way more with London Calling than it does with Smash or Dude Ranch. I see it as a fork in the road. It may have introduced you to mid-90s West Coast punk. Maybe it inspired you to go back and listen to all the first wave bands. Or maybe it was your gateway into ska, rockabilly, and reggae. And Out Come the Wolves was everything that punk had done up until that point, and everything that it's done ever since. It's a landmark album, and its value to the punk genre cannot be overstated. Matt Freeman is the greatest punk rock bassist of all time. He found a way to Tuvix the styles of Jaunt Entwistle and Paul Simonon. He plays like no one else, and he makes it look easy. I'm torn between Roots Radical or Time Bomb. Roots Radical is definitely more punk, but I think Matt's playing on Time Bomb was way more influential. That walking bass style was everywhere after this album. We all wanted to be Matt. Check out a bit of Time Bomb.
Black coat, white shoes, black hat, Cadillac, yeah. The boys are Time Bomb.
NoFX had to be on this list. Fat Mike is God. I always say Matt Freeman is the best bass player, but I actually prefer Fat Mike. No other person has impacted punk as much as him. He's the Nick Fury of the punk rock cinematic universe. Mike's influence on punk bass is undeniable. Picking something that represents his value was tough. I wanted to pick Stickin' in My Eye. I wanted to pick Don't Call Me White. I really wanted to pick Scared of Bums. I love the early 90s albums, but I don't think Fat Mike reached final form until '97, So Long and Thanks for All the Shoes. I'm once again biased. NoFX is my favorite punk band. So Long is my favorite album. Either way, this is them at their best. I've checked the math and it works. They've never put out a bad album, but this is the top of the mountain. I think more punk bass players have emulated Mike than any other player. The technique and tone on this album are the gold standard. Fat Mike is the GOAT. Check out a bit of their song Kids of the K-Hole. Well, we've reached the end of the list. That's my timeline of punk bass in 10 songs. How'd I do? Do you agree with any of my picks? What would your list look like? What is punk anyway? Let me know down in the comments. Finally, please make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell, all the YouTube stuff. I know it's annoying to hear that all the time, but it really helps. I'm having a great time making these videos, and the more that I know that you're enjoying them, the more that it motivates me to continue. I'll catch you next time, but until then, be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes! See ya.